All right, we're right at time now. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar on how to fact check in the AI age, how to spot deepfakes, and how to avoid clickbait, brought to you by the News Literacy Project. Today, we'll be going over the basics of fact checking with RumorGuard writer Dan Evon, and we'll also go over how to debunk misinformation for yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it. Oh, and before then, a few housekeeping notes, excuse me. The first thing I want to share is that today's presentation will be recorded. We'll provide the recording in an email after this, succeeding this presentation with the recording and also some of the resources and a link for our survey. The second thing is that we will disable the chat because of the size of this webinar, but you can still ask questions in the Q&A feature. We will have people, moderators from the News Literacy Project, helping out to help answer some of your questions. And following the end of the presentation, you will be able to ask questions during the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. So I'm DeMario Phipps-Smith, the Senior Manager of Community Learning at NLP. I'm a journalist and a former marketing communications professional. I've worked in everywhere from traditional newsrooms to digital startups. But I am particularly passionate about disinformation affecting marginalized communities. If there's any burning questions that you have that we're unable to get to today, please email me at the email address to the left, dphipsmith@newslit.org, and I will do my best to get back to you in a timely manner. So if you're unfamiliar with the News Literacy Project, we implore you to check out all of our resources in our website at newslit.org. We have a plethora of resources for educators, youth, and the general public to become more engaged in news literacy and to help combat misinformation. If there's anything here that you see from this presentation as particularly interesting, we, especially for educators and young people, please get them in contact with our resources. We want to grow this movement of news literacy and help Americans combat misinformation. So when we think news literacy, we think about three essential principles. The first is that information is paramount to us being able to take civic action, for us to make healthy and conscious decisions in our lives as Americans, for us to make good decisions, voting and looking for resources and being part of our communities. The second, our democracy requires we have a healthy discourse. Not always, it won't always be the case that we'll agree, but we should be able to have healthy conversations that lead to good dialogue. The third, we can empower ourselves to be less susceptible to misinformation by learning news literacy skills and understanding how to find credible sources of information. So we think about this work as an approach to learning that teaches learners how to think about news, but not what to think about any particular source or source of information. So we think about it like this. We want to take people away from having a cynicism about the news, being highly critical of the news, to having a healthy skepticism and being able to critically evaluate the things that they read and see. This work really hinges upon people understanding the importance of the First Amendment and that having a free press is paramount to the health and success of our democracy. Again, we are a nonpartisan national education non-for-profit with focusing on clear learning objectives and goals and standards that can be evaluated. We believe in doing work that brings both sides to the table so that we all as a country can combat misinformation. So when we're thinking about this current digital age of misinformation, of AI and AI manipulation, we need to start at the root of it, at the basics of it. And the through line through a lot of this AI manipulation comes down to misinformation. But what is it exactly? Misinformation is anything that's false, inaccurate, misleading, regardless of its intent. But it's important that we distinguish the terms, right? And really identify what the labels are. At NLP, we separate misinformation into two distinct categories. Disinformation, which is anything false or misleading, but with the intentionality behind it, right? Knowingly trying to misinform and disinform people, right? This is a deliberate attempt to try to disinform people. Misinformation is people who share it. You can think of misinformers or people who are sharing it, right? Making a mistake, mistakenly sharing misinformation. Disinformers are clickbait farms and propaganda sites who are purposefully trying to create these false narratives around content. The issue today, and for a while now, it seems to be getting worse, is that there is a very fine line between what's fake and what's real today. It's hard to make that distinction. And really, the most convincing pieces of misinformation and conspiracy theories, they hinge on at least one small nugget of truth. And this is where fact checkers come into play, where professional fact-checking organizations come into play. The good ones, and when you see fact checking done well in this digital age, they really break down the nuances of misinformation. So for example, PolitiFact, a very reputable fact-checking organization, has a truth-o-meter. And what they do is they rate things on a mostly false to mostly true basis, understanding that there are sometimes some parts of something that's inaccurate that might be true, but generally speaking, it's false, right? Or you take a different rating system, like the example on the top right, where it's a mixture, right? There's a nuance to it. Most things aren't just completely false or completely true, especially in this digital age. So this is where RumorGuard comes into play. As of last year, the News Literacy Project debuted its fact-checking platform to help walk people through the steps that they could take to fact-check and debunk viral pieces of content that they find on social media. If you look at any one of our fact checks, we start with a very quick look to give you a breakdown and analysis of the things that are wrong or questionable at play here. The next part is the takeaway. We really break down the steps and the techniques that we use in order to fact check, in the hopes of, after reading enough of these, someone can feel comfortable fact checking and debunking misinformation on their own. And so this work, this work is built on the foundation of the 5 factors, the 5 principles that we use to authentify pieces of content that we find online. Think about this through a number of different lenses. We call them the 5 factors. For the purpose of this webinar, you might also refer to it as an acronym called CARES, and the C in CARES would stand for context, right? So we think about pieces of misinformation that exist today. Context is one of the oldest tricks in the book. It's something that's been used for a long time, before AI, before social media has existed, to misinform people. So when you think about digital manipulation and AI manipulation, a big part of this hinges on captions. When you look at a caption, you think it's innocuous and harmless. Oh, it's just telling what's going on, it's just painting a picture. But a caption is also a narrative. It's telling a story, right? And so when misinformers share a photo with a fake caption, they can change people's entire perception of an event. So in this example on the right, we see the plane crash of the Yeti Airlines in January of this year. This actually happened. This tragic event actually happened. The issue here is that these are all photos from various crashes that happen in different years. And we see this a lot on social media. This is a great way that people misinform people, and it's really common. And it's hard to really, because they're using real footage, but just in the wrong context. The next factor is authenticity. With this digital age emerging, it's so much more easy to find and access information, but it's also just as easy to manipulate it as well. Many of the tricks that we saw before AI emerged are, evolving now. So like Photoshop and photo manipulation, right? Those same principles are being used now with tools that are AI based. But when you're browsing the web, it's important to carefully evaluate the source that this thing originated from. Who posted this and why, right? Where did this come from? Did this come from a standards-based news organization or a propaganda-based click farm, right? Those two things have different credibility. One way that you can determine the authenticity of a photo is to use a reverse image search. By doing this, you can trace the digital footprints of a photo and trace it back to its original posting. But as a disclaimer, there are also photos that for various reasons are harder to find online. So there are cases where a reverse image search would not be as helpful. But generally speaking, that is the first place where you start, where you want to identify a photo. The next factor to think about is reasoning, right? Is this based on solid logic? Misinformation is designed to play on our cognitive biases and make us fall into logical fallacies. Conspiracy theories hinge upon making you feel strong emotions like fear or anger or joy or happiness to make impossible things seem like they actually happen. So for instance, when we're looking on social media and we see someone share, like this example on the right, an explosion near the Pentagon, breaking news, there's breaking, it's an explosion near the Pentagon. Because of the landscape that we live in today, because of all the threats to our national security that we've seen over the years, this seems like a likely possibility, right? It plays into our confirmation bias. But you have to check the source when you see things like this. If this is coming from a regular person's account or a non-verified account, that's one sign that this might not be real verifiable news. Another thing to do is to pay attention if any news organizations or standards-based news organizations are covering this event. The more that are covering it, the more likely that this is actually happening. The next factor to be aware of is evidence, right? Misinformation in its very nature lacks evidence, but it's tricking people into thinking about false evidence and faulty logic behind the evidence. So a question to think about when you're looking at things is what exists that actually proves this claim? On the internet, unfortunately, there's no barrier to protect people from misinformation. Anyone can really post what they want whenever they want. There might be some efforts to take it down afterwards, but generally speaking, you can post whatever you want initially. And so with that in mind, we have to approach memes and social media posts without links and citations with skepticism. You have to have a healthy skepticism when thinking about social media because some posts are designed to be very misleading. Even when you're thinking about data and stats, things that seem very verifiable and very solid and things that are based in logic, bad actors will oftentimes cherry pick certain information in order to spread faulty logic narratives. So in the example on the right, there's a posting where someone posted Stanley Kubrick gave you the moon landing. And the reason why this is evidence for some people is because there are a number of people who believe that, conspiracy theorists who believe that the moon landing was staged, that it was false, it didn't happen. And so when you attach a name, right, when you put a name to this person, to this thing that supposedly did it, it makes it more real for people. But this evidence isn't actually evidence. It's false patternicity. It's faulty logic. There's no connection here. It's a baseless claim. The next thing to think about is the source. Where is this coming from? Knowing that not all sources of information are equal. Standards-based news organizations hold themselves to a certain standard that a blog site or a propaganda site doesn't do. So when you're approaching pieces of content online, ask yourself, has it been confirmed by a credible source? Be on the lookout for social media posts that come from accounts that are trying to spread a certain ideology, right? So if you are looking at a post and you see in their comments that everybody's fighting against, one side, they're not allowing people to have a healthy discourse about things, this might be a sign that this is a filter bubble, that these people are in a us against them mentality and approaching their conspiracy theories that way. So check how many verifiable, reputable, and credible news sources have reported this claim. Bad actors are trying to take advantage of the information gap when news coverage happens. When someone dies or there's a big scandal that happens, there are oftentimes, for various reasons, different levels of information that are levied out. So for instance, if someone of note dies, maybe their family hasn't, received word of their passing or haven't issued a statement. And so certain news organizations would wait, right, before they release any information until they get the official word. But the bad actors, knowing that people want more information and they want to follow up on the story, they're going to release certain things to take advantage of that, knowing that there's a demand of information. So the two lenses to think about when we approach fact checking for sources is the source of the claim, right? What is this source's intent? Is this a propaganda farm? Are they a satire organization, right? Is this meant to be funny? Or is this a partisan organization that's trying to drive home a certain narrative? The other thing to think about is the source of the content, right? Is this the original footage, the original document? Has it been doctored or tailored in any way? If you'd like to know more about RumorGuard and the techniques and principles that we use in order to fact check, you can check out more at rumorguard.org/join to learn more about some of our techniques, to dive deeper into some of the practices that we use, and to play around with some of the features and give us feedback on some fact checks that you might want to see. So at this time, I would like to bring up Dan Evon, a writer on the RumorGuard platform who helps people understand fact-checking practices so they can apply them in their lives. Before coming to NLP, Dan worked for Snopes, the oldest fact-checking organization on the internet. Dan, welcome to the program. How are you doing?
Hey, DeMario, thanks for having me on. And thanks for going through all the 5 factors. That was great.
Thank you, man. So I guess we'll jump right into it. We're already midway through the presentation. Right now, we're going to jump into some live fact checks of something that you might see online. So recently, around the time of the Barbie movie craze, a number of celebrities and people were seen in pink garments to celebrate the movie. It was hard to discern who was really wearing it and who wasn't. Dan, if I was to run across this on social media, how do I determine if this is real or fake? What are some things I should be aware of?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting example because it started circling around a time when a bunch of similar photos, genuine photos, were going around. There was a lot of celebrities that were taking pictures of themselves in pink outfits going to the premiere. So if you're scrolling on social media, you're just swiping down and you come across this image and you might really not take the time to carefully examine it. You might just accept it and move on. And so I think that's one of the things with the 5 factors is all the questions are important in their own right. But really, it's just if you keep those in your head when you're scrolling social media, it's going to help you slow down to better examine content. So if you're asking yourself, is this image authentic? You might take a closer look at it. And with AI images, One of the giveaways is surfaces that are just unusually smooth. And if you look, it's all over this image. The plants have no texture. LeBron's skin looks rubbery. I don't know what's going on with that plant base, but everything looks just a little bit off. So with AI images, you do want to practice finding these visual cues, but there's also other ways to determine that these are fake. Every image online comes from somewhere. So when you're examining these, you also want to look at all the information around it. So in this case, you're looking at the account, which you can see up at the top, which is NBA AI Extremo. AI is right in their name, which is a strong indication that this image might not be fake. I'd also point out that these sort of images that fake images often circulate during trending topics. People want to get these photos in front of people, so what they do is they latch onto this social conversation. So if everyone is talking about Barbie or using these photos, there's a good chance that fakes are going to be slipped into that. So that's something just to watch out when you're scrolling social media. And the last thing about this is there were other images of Barbie premieres. Another one involved Obama and Biden in similar pink outfits. So when you encounter content that seems like it is seeking controversy, it's outrage bait, it's something that's going to get people on both sides of an issue talking about, it's a good signal to slow down and take a closer look at the image.
Awesome. No, thanks for all that. I think your tips on the things that you can't see are especially poignant and important. And then I think for me, the things that really caught my attention with this were like the tattoos. I think for AI, it's kind of hard to get the exact, and LeBron has very distinct tattoos. So I think that might be a giveaway. And of course, the facial features as well. But moving right along, let's get to the next fact check. Let's do another one. So Dan, if I saw this run across my social media feed, and I'm wondering about an extreme sunburn competition, and if it's one near my hometown, how do I check to see if this is verifiable? Is this valid? How do I check to see how authentic this is?
So, with AI images, there are going to be clues of digital fakery, and if you take closer look at these images, you can see some signs. The top right image, you can see one of the women seems to have 6 fingers on her hand. On the top left image, if you look closer at the crowd, the people in the crowd, they don't really have faces, they are just kind of blobs. But I don't think it's necessary, I don't think it's a reasonable request to ask people to examine all of these images so closely. So if I came across this image, the first thing I would do is ask myself if it was plausible. I've never heard of a sunburn competition, and getting sunburned is a dangerous thing. That I don't think that, they would get permits to hold sort of contests or get corporate sponsors, and it just doesn't seem real. So you can look at the images, but again, one of the better tactics is to look at the information around this claim. So I would do a text search. I would Google sunburn competition and see if there are any news reports. And in this case, you'll probably find fact checks now, but if you encountered this image once it went viral, you would probably find nothing, because sunburn competitions aren't really a thing. There was a travel magazine that they asked people to submit photos one time, but something like what's pictured, a bunch of people staying out in the sun all day, that's not something that really happens. So that would make me question this content. And then you start looking for where it's coming from. If you go onto Twitter and do the same sort of search, sunburn competition, you come across the same set of photos, the same claims. You don't see additional videos. You don't see these events from other angles. It's the same claim repeated over and over, which is another indication that this is probably not a genuine set of photos. Yeah, I think that's a good way to discuss those.
Awesome. And I think one of the things I heard you saying, like regarding both of these, is just to like slow down, like evaluate what you're reading, what you're seeing, check the sources, you know, think about critically about the logic of this thing. Can this actually happen? How likely is this? Is a good place to start. Sounds great.
Very much.
So thank you, everybody. That wraps up the presentation. We're going to take some questions in the Q&A. But before we get to that, I would like to do a couple more plugs. If please subscribe to RumorGuard. You can scan the QR code on the left to get the link to RumorGuard, or you can follow the link listed below. And then please, at some point, please complete our short survey. It helps us improve our presentations and you the best type of content possible regarding news literacy. So please get a chance to do that. If you don't get a chance in the next couple of minutes, we'll also shoot out a link to the survey in the follow-up email. So getting to the questions, Dan, I think a great place to start is with this question. Can you explain the concept of deepfakes and AI and how AI has evolved in this digital age? And how might we detect and work to more effectively counteract misinformation in the AI age?
Yeah, so I mean, AI is a really big buzzword at the moment. It's been around for a while, but what the big change recently is that everyone has access to these tools. But it's really just another evolution in photo manipulation. People have been doctoring photos since they've been taking photos. Back in like the late 1800s, some of the earliest fakes were people drawing tornadoes onto pieces of glass and then photographing them against backgrounds. And that wasn't necessarily done to fool people, it was done to illustrate how damaging a tornado could be. And as technology has advanced, more and more tools have come about that has made making fake photos easier. And that's really the problem that we're having now, is that it's not that AI photos are necessarily more convincing than a photo that is made in Photoshop. It's the speed required and the access that people have to them, where these things can be created as soon as news is breaking, and then those images are going out online. They're also harder to detect with reverse image searches because if you have a miscaptioned photo, you're going to find that in a reverse image search because it's probably been online before, and then it's being shared out of context. With an AI image, it's usually being created and shared the same day, so it's not getting cataloged by search engines. So you have to consider more than just the image. You have to consider the context, the source. You have to look at all the information that's surrounding these fake photos. I think that was the question. I think it may have gone on to a tangent. I get that?
No, I think you did a really good job of answering that.
All
So
right, nice.
we'll get to a couple questions from the Q&A. I think this is a great one. How do you see the line between parody and misinformation / disinformation? What's the line between that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think you would draw the line at sort of what DeMario was talking about earlier with disinformation and misinformation. Because, you know, there are spoofs out there that make fun of politicians, and it's for humorous effect. But then there's also the same sort of content, but it's disguised, and the purpose of that content is to fool people. So I think that is a good line to distinguish those two. With satirical content too, and you can see that with imposter content, where something may start as satire, and then it gets taken out of context and it gets shared as news. And then I think that's another distinction between what is a spoof and what is meant to misinform.
Yeah. Another great question from the chat. This is more about newsrooms and how they deal with AI. Do you have any advice for how to think about publications like Wired using AI to generate content? Should they disclose it? And should reputable publishers always disclose when they're using AI in their content?
Yeah, I don't know if NLP has an official position on this, but in my opinion, I absolutely think that they should. And one of my real worries with AI generated content is there's so many accusations of bias in the media, and there's so many accusations of unfair coverage that I feel people will put undue trust into AI generated news articles. And I think that that is a big mistake. I can see some benefits to it. I don't know, like local sports stories, but even that, I feel that's taking away jobs. So in general, I think that there are AI tools that can be useful in reporting, but fully AI generated content, I don't believe is at a point that can replace a human author. AI makes mistakes. It has invented evidence in some cases. I don't think that credible news outlets should be relying on AI generators to create content.
Okay. So this question I think would be good to kind of end off on, Dan, kind of more of a hopeful note. Are there any advances in AI or AI related technology that you are excited about when it comes to fact checking? Is there anything that you could think of that might get you excited about using AI tools to help you fact check?
Sure. We were talking a little earlier about reverse image searches, and there's a lot of different tools there to look for out of context photos. And there's starting to be tools that can do the same thing with AI. In my experience, they are not 100% reliable. And actually, a lot of them give you answers in percentages. They'll say there's an 80% chance that this is AI. There's a 20% chance it's real. So that is something that is developing, and I believe will get better. It will be a big help. I also use AI as part of a quick search engine sometimes if I'm looking for more information. That information usually has to be double checked, but sometimes that will give me a thought to go into one direction or another. So yeah, there are tools coming out and being developed, but I still think we're in the infancy of AI. And if I'm looking at a photo, whether it's made in a dark room or Photoshop or AI, I feel like there's a lot of better tools out there that we can use that we don't have to rely on AI tools.
Awesome. Well, we're a little bit over time. I appreciate you, Dan, for all the amazing answers that you gave in this great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I saw a couple of questions about the recording being available. We will send out a recording following this presentation in the next couple of days. Thank you so much. Everything that you've seen here is available at newslit.org for free. All our resources for educators are free. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. And I look forward to meeting you all again next time. Take care.